Ooh, hello, hello. We've never done one of these before, have we? No. Apologies for the poor wallpaper behind me. It's not very good. Um, I just really wanted to try out one of these live streams, and I've not gone live for a while. I used to be live on 548, but never, never visually. But many years ago, I can't remember what it was called. Back in the noughties, there was something where you could just do something very similar to YouTube, and I used to do that. But anyway, so going to basically just sort of talk about some of the episodes of the Shy Life podcast that came out during June 2023. Now, I was a little bit late, a little bit behind on releasing episodes back in May, partly because of my poor fingers. It didn't make editing very easy at all, but we did get back on track though in June, and I managed 6 episodes in May, but in June I managed 8, which is more my preferred amount of episodes released. Far too many people would say, but well, the first episode of June 2023 came out on the 7th of June, and it was episode 643, and it was called Shy Yeti's 7-Year Itch. Now, it was our 7th anniversary edition, and really should have come out in late May. But anyway, it made a nice episode to release as the first episode for June. It was a crossover with my old friend Toppy Smelly from the Smellcast, and originally at one point it was going to be a proper crossover between the Smellcast and the Shy Life podcast, in which the first half of the episode would have been a Smellcast episode. But we didn't really quite work the sort of timing for that. And actually, I think a lot of the best stuff was in the first half of the episode anyway. So I think I would have probably ended up flashing back to a lot of what had happened. So it kind of worked out as a good anniversary episode. I think it's all about Yeti Uncle John going to Pickle Hollow, going to a market and buying a coat which happened to be full of fleas. And then not only did he spread the fleas around half of Pickle Hollow, he brought them back to my area. And, well, Toppy showed up and we had to vanquish that coat before the whole of the regulars got infected with fleas. And why did we do an episode about fleas? Because it was the 7th anniversary, and I got the idea of the 7-year itch in my head. So, yes. So the episode was called Shy Yeti's 7-Year Itch. The next episode 644, was called Two Views of the Same Week, 1990 edition. Now, those of you who have been watching for a while, or listening, I should say, will know that over the last year or 18 months, I've been putting little sort of extracts from my 1990 diary, which I found quite, about 2 years ago. And I thought about sort of just reading the odd extract, but then realised that so much of the entries were sort of relevant to me now, 33 years later. So many of the films or the TV programs that I mention now, some of the music I mention now, that was all happening back in 1990 when it was new. So there's nothing particularly salacious in the diaries. I was only 16 or 17. There's the odd catty remark, but of course, we even worked the 1990 diary into a plot line last year about Radio.fm, but I won't go into that now. So this particular episode had Nick and I. We reached late February in the diary, and we compared weeks. Nick has a diary from the same time, not as long entries as mine, but I would read a day, of my diary, and then he would read the same day from his diary. And often, because we saw each other a lot at the time, because I was living in Salisbury instead of school in Salisbury, the two diaries meet. And well, we thought it was very interesting anyway, so made for a nice episode. So the third episode of June 2023 was episode 645, Looking for an Ick Replacement. Now, as those of you who follow the show, sort of as the episodes come out, you'll know that Ick has gone missing. Well, not only missing, he's been kidnapped by evil villains from another dimension. The only trouble is they want us to go over there, and we don't want to. I don't want to. I can't do it. So at the moment, until a more sensible way of rescuing it comes to mind, we are looking for an ick replacement, and this is what episode 645 was all about. This came out on June the 13th. So in this episode, we audition 3 different possibilities, let's say. None of them are exactly perfect, but we do find one. But you'll have to find out more about that by listening to the episode. Now, the 4th episode of June, which came out on the 15th of June, was episode 646, Chewing the Cud over the big hits of 2000. Now, the reference to Chewing the Cud is because my guest on that episode was Lee, who is one of the hosts of the show, the podcast, and videocast, Chewing the Cud, as well as many other podcasts. And those of you who have been listening to the Sherlock podcast for a while will know that Lee has been a regular guest of ours for the last few years, and that we usually discuss music. And in this episode, we discuss the big hits of the year 2000 in both the UK and the US. So, yeah, I mean, it's always good to chat to Lee, as he knows a lot about music. And yeah, so it was good to put that one out. Our 5th episode, episode 647, released on the 21st of June, 2023, was called Yeti Uncle John's Artificial Intelligence Nightmare. And it was sort of inspired by the fact that not so long ago, I downloaded on my own phone one of those artificial intelligence photo apps that I'd seen lots of people using, and kept thinking, should I not? But anyway, I did. And I rather liked some of the photos that came up, not just of me, but of Dealey, and also they've been quite fun to use for show art as well. But so it gave me the idea that I should do an episode with Yeti Uncle John using a similar app, but obviously Yeti Uncle John, when he tries to do things with technology, usually it goes badly wrong, and it does in this episode. But you'll just have to listen and see whether we manage to get him out of trouble. Following that episode, on the 26th of June, we had episode 648, Shy Yeti and the Britpop Brigade. Shy Yeti and the Britpop Brigade. It was originally going to be called the Britpop episode, which probably would have been a better idea because I could have said it easier. But I thought, being the poet that I am, I thought Britpop Brigade was a nicer, more poetic title. I just can't speak. Anyway, this was actually an episode that we recorded sort of over a year ago. It was one of those episodes that you record at the time and you kind of think, well, it's not necessarily going to be one that comes out immediately, but it's good to have sort of on the sidelines. Not to say that it's not a good episode, it's just that sometimes it's nice to have these sorts of episodes sort of ready to go when you're running behind a bit on with editing and things like that, because some episodes take a lot of time to edit and some episodes are very quick. And the last 3 episodes of June sort of came together very quickly. But anyway, episode 648, we had Harry and we had Callum. But it was mainly Callum talking about Britpop music, and Callum and I used to go to lots of gigs together, and Harry was always interested in Britpop music, and previously he'd only been sort of very interested in one or two particular groups, and it was sort of our university years as well, our 20s. So yeah, it was good to talk to them about Britpop, and also Callum and I went onto the internet to see if we could find some Britpop quizzes, as Callum and I often do quizzes, and yeah, some of the quizzes were easy, some of the quizzes were, some of them could have been better researched, but there you go. That's what we find. We kind of like doing quizzes off the internet, because sometimes when the answer pops up, you go, that's not the right answer. But anyway, so our penultimate episode of June, released on the 28th of June, was episode 649, and it's called "It's Time to Get Randomly Science Fiction-y." That's the title. It's an episode with Nick again, Nick Goodman and Toppie Smelly, and it was just one of those Saturday afternoons when I'm back at my parents', I'm with Nick, and Nick had been over at my parents' house with me. He'd been looking at some of the videos that he's been digitizing, and I found out that Toppie was free to record, so it's always good to get Toppie and Nick together. And we were going to do some random questions, as Nick and I have been doing a lot of those in the last few years. But before we started recording, for some reason, I think it's because Toppie had been to a convention. We just started talking about science fiction conventions. Firstly, the one that he'd attended, and then the ones that Nick and I had attended back in the 90s and noughties. So the recorder was running, so it was all preserved. So I said to them at the time, well, let's keep that and have that as part of the episode. So you've got random questions, you've got would you ever questions, and in the middle you've got our chat about science fiction conventions. So now the final episode of June came out on June the 30th, and it was episode 650, and it's called Another Andrew Comes A-Calling. That's just a reference to the fact that we have a lot of Andrews on the Charlotte podcast. Some of them aren't known as Andrew. Kirby, for instance, he's an Andrew. Muffley on Tour, he's an Andrew. But we don't mention that, though. He's Muffley on Tour. But there are other Andrews involved with the show, including my old friend Andrew, who lives in Berlin, who had done an episode before and also has appeared on Sutton Park clips from way back. But it was very nice. He was in the UK and he popped in, and he came over to my house, and we recorded an episode partly about TV, but he also got to have a nice long conversation with Yeti Uncle John, which, he seemed to have enjoyed, and Yeti Uncle John definitely enjoyed. But yes, we also had we had a number of new tunes from Muffley on Tour, but in that particular episode we had one called Poise and one called Ick or Ick. And you might be hearing more of those tunes, but I can't say anything more about that at the moment. I suppose I should also have said, when we did the random episode, the words that we discussed included steam, relationships, indulge, photo, and reminder. Yes. So that's almost it. I don't know if I should give you a little bit of a clue as to some of the episodes that are coming up in July. I could do that. The only thing is that things do change, and not always what's on the blog site is what gets released. And Sometimes if I record new episodes, they get pushed to the front. It really depends. Usually, if there's a guest that's particularly different or special or new, their episodes get pushed near the top of the list. But on the other hand, I do have a lot of story episodes already recorded, and I have to be a bit careful because some of them are timed to come out at certain times of the year. So I have to be very careful that, for instance, an episode that I haven't yet recorded set in November the 5th, I must make sure that that can come out then, really, otherwise it spoils the story. But anyway, well, to give you a rough idea of some of the episodes without too much detail, and you can read this off the blog, so I'm not spoiling anything too much. Episodes coming out in July 2023, August Evans and the Truth of the Queer Cove Bar. Well, that is actually out. That sort of answers some of the questions about Damius, August Evans, and how he went missing back in 2020. The episode I'm editing at the moment is more chatter about Australian TV with Andy, the birthday twin. Then we're going to have an episode with Bettina and, well, some anecdotes about her life in cinema. We're going to have another episode with Martin about music from the 70s. And then we've got an episode involving the mystery of the reincarnated... I told you I can't speak. The mystery of the reincarnated workman. That's another Bettina episode. Then we'll be celebrating the 20th anniversary of my poetry collection, Go Forth and Divide. We'll also get to meet Ozymandias the Talking Duck. And yeah, well, the rest of the episodes may or may not come out in July, or they might slip into August. But anyway, that's all I want to say. So I just thought I'd try this out as an option and see if it worked. And maybe if it's okay and people want to watch it, then I might do one of these once a month or more often, who knows? Or I might even have some guests if I've got any guests well, what I should say is that this weekend coming, we're recording a Chatterbox episode. So I will be with Mr. Nick Goodman on Saturday. So maybe after we've recorded Chatterbox, who knows, I might record a little chat with him for YouTube, but we'll see. Okay, so what do I do to stop this? Okay. Right, well, sorry Dealey couldn't be here. He's having a sleep. But anyway, more chat, and thanks to everyone who's listened to the episodes released in June 2023. And I hope you all enjoy the episodes that come out in July. Chat to you again soon. Bye-bye.